a boxing betting expert.
I know, David.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
He really gets into the nitty-gritty of this whole thing.
Sean, thanks for joining me.
You're welcome. Nice to see you, David.
Yes, so we connected about a year ago. It's before the first Usyk Fury fight, and we had a mutual contempt for the phrase "a good big un beats a good little un." And I know you were pretty strong on Usyk getting the upset back then as well. So
Yeah.
I really enjoy following you. You go deep into the big fights, but you also cover the less high-profile fights as well. So for me, you're a must-follow on Twitter, X.
Yeah, thank you.
And I'm excited to hear about how you got into the sport and your sort of first-hand experience of it. So, what was your first boxing memory? What's the first fight you remember?
First boxing memory. So when I was kind of like a child, sort of in the 80s. I used to sneak downstairs and watch the big fights because obviously a lot of them would be on ITV. And I remember like sneaking downstairs. I don't know, I was just fascinated by it. You know, they almost seem like godlike, don't they? When you're that age and you see like a prime Mike Tyson just rampaging through the heavyweight division in the sort of mid to late 80s. And, you know, you'd have people in the house talking about boxing, and Tyson was just constantly spoken about. And it was almost like he was just completely unbeatable. And of course, many people did think he was unbeatable, didn't they? Up until the Douglas upset. I think my first boxing memory is probably coming downstairs in the June 88, late at night by myself, putting the TV on really quiet and watching the Tyson Spinks fight.
Right.
Just unbelievable. Obviously, They had all the build-up. I think it was on ITV at the time. They had all the build-up. It was really exciting seeing these, you know, two boxers and all the highlights they were doing, had all the music in the background. And then obviously the fight was just an absolute annihilation, wasn't it?
So you saw that live? You watched that live?
Yeah, I think it was live. It was either live or on repeat. I can't quite remember, but I remember it was in 88.
Yeah.
It was probably live. I think they did show it live on TV, but yeah, it was brilliant. I was just hooked ever since, really.
So you got there a few months before me, because I was aware. So I remember sort of hearing of Prime Tyson and this sort of like unbelievable force coming through. And the first fight I saw was actually possibly post Prime Tyson, was Frank Bruno, 1989, because obviously the British connection was just huge for that fight. And that was that's the first one I stayed up for. But just anyone who sort of grew up in the 80s, you can't help but have, you know, been swept along by that Tyson story.
Yeah, definitely. And we used to have like lodgers at my house at the time. And basically, one of the guys would send like boxing magazines. He'd sort of give them to my brother and me, and you'd just go through all like the old ring magazines. And Tyson was everywhere; he was all over it. And then you could see, you know, it'd be about his backstory because Tomato, first meeting Bobby Stewart, you know, correctional facilities, then going through the amateur ranks and just missing out on the Olympics by losing to Henry Tillman. You know, and then obviously becoming a young pro. And then Tomato died, and he sort of worked his way through the heavyweight ranks and left a sort of trail of destruction behind him. Just absolutely fantastic fighter. He's probably one of my favorite fighters ever, I think. But I feel like I think I've got a balanced view on him, but others disagree. I think Mike Tyson's one of those fighters where he can be very overrated, but also very underrated. And I think the truth is he's somewhere in between.
It's so interesting. Like I've spoken to dozens of people now doing these, and you're absolutely right. It's either it's people have strong views in both directions, and perhaps somewhere in the middle is the right one. I don't know. I mean, I think the problem is the simple question: what was his defining win? Who was his best win against? I don't know if you've got a quick answer for that.
So yeah, a lot of people will straight away go say Michael Spinks, or, you know, when he first won the title, Trevor Burke. But if you actually look at his resume and his record, I think that's aged really well, because actually the 80s did have some very talented fighters. If you look at, I think a while back I looked at the top 10 rankings. I think it was either in the Ring magazine or something else, but it's from like the end of 85, and Tyson goes on to be about 8 of those fighters. And I think there's only 2 fighters he didn't beat. One was Buster Douglas, and the second one was Tim Witherspoon, which obviously that would have been a good fight, but that wasn't Tyson's fault. He would fight anyone. And Tim Witherspoon obviously lost to Bone Crusher Smith in an upset. And then Bone Crusher Smith went on, and the only way he could kind of survive against Tyson was to maul and spoil him. But he beat a lot of good fighters, I think. And if you look at their records as well, and who they beat and who they fought, you know, they're all fighting each other, and it was kind of like a bit topsy-turvy in terms of who won. But Tyson pretty much dominated them all, and they were hard fights as well. You know, he had a really good win against like Jose Revolta, but that was probably an ideal fight for him. James Tillis, where Tyson says in one of his books that he basically couldn't move the next day because he took so many body punches. Mitch Green was a kind of well thought of fighter at the time when Tyson fought him, and then obviously in his championship run he beat a whole host of contenders. Tony Tucker, I think, had been unbeaten in about sort of 10 years. Was a very, very good fighter, physical specimen. He gave Tyson a good fight. Was doing well in the first 2-3 rounds, and Tyson kind of knuckled down and got through him.
Yeah.
And even then, after the Douglas fight, he goes on. He beats Alex Stewart, who I think at one point was ranked number 4. Alex Stewart, of course, gave Holyfield, Foreman absolute fits in those fights. And I know stars make fights, but you can't not give someone credit when they've beaten that fighter who's given other people hell. And I think just because Tyson beat him in 1 round, he got no credit for it. And then, of course, he fought Razor Ruddock, who a lot of people didn't want to fight at the time. Ruddock was a massive puncher, very confident. And then Tyson had 2 wars with him.
I think Ruddock is one of Tyson's best wins.
Definitely.
I think the problem with Spinks is, wasn't he coming off an injury and a layoff, and he was a very small heavyweight.
Yeah, so Spinks was a small heavyweight, absolutely, one of the best light heavyweights ever. Really good fighter, had a good heavyweight run. Obviously, had 2 very close fights, debatable really, with Larry Holmes, who was coming towards, who was past his prime at that point. But he also had a couple of other good wins over an H. Cooney. But he was a good fighter. But yeah, he did have like bad knees, didn't he? But I think the problem with Spinks against Tyson, don't forget a lot of people did pick Spinks to beat Tyson.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, those people would deny that now, but there's always a trace somewhere of people's predictions, isn't there? But Spinks tried to stand and fight him as well, which is credit to him. But because of that, he got knocked out. And the Ruddock fights, you have some people say, "Oh, well, he never came from behind to win a fight. He didn't have any heart. He couldn't dig in." I mean, you just watch the Ruddock fights, completely discredits that argument. I mean, Ruddock hit him with so many hard punches that would have knocked anyone out, and he kept digging in, kept fighting. But
the problem is, you have to sort of do because he was so effective and so dominant in his victories. There are not that many opportunities for him to have come back from adversity. But he did against Ruddock, absolutely. But it's when it's at the real elite level, like the real sort of Hall of Famers, the Holyfields and the Lewises. Lewis, he was past it, but Holyfield, considering how Holyfield was probably a cherry-picked, washed-up, heart problem, 16-1 outsider, and he couldn't beat him. And I don't think any version of Tyson would come off favourably against any version of Holyfield. I just think that matchup is just Holyfield bullying the bully. Whether it's too much use of the head or not, he just had his number.
See, I disagree with that. I think when they were due to fight in November 91, Tyson would have beat him. He was still sharp, still hit hard. He was still gritty. He still used to come in shape. Holyfield back then wasn't as big. His frame was different. He got hit a lot more. If you look at Holyfield pre-92, he would get hurt a lot more when he would get hit with big punches than he would after. Right. Obviously, you don't want to go into the rabbit's hole of ped use and stuff like that, because that's obviously So, but his whole physique did change post kind of 92, 93, and also Tyson went to prison in February 92, and he was shot when he came out. If this is one thing that does kind of annoy me when people talk about certain fighters, they don't even look at their technique or how they move. If you look at Tyson's technique pre-prison, especially kind of around 88, sort of 87, 88. It was completely different. His footwork was different. It was faster. He was quicker on his feet. If you look at him post-prison, he doesn't even hold his hands the same. Yeah. He wasn't moving his head. Yeah. He kind of a bit more muscular up top.
Yeah. The jab had gone. He was throwing triple jabs before he went to prison. And stuff.
And look at the way he holds his gloves post-prison as well. He didn't even hold them the same. He became what I think more of an arm puncher rather than using his hips and waist. His legs to put torque in the punch and kind of get that momentum. And so that's kind of something that people just don't even talk about.
So do you sort of discount everything after prison then in terms of like his position in sort of the greatest debate?
So I pretty much the thing with like Tyson Holyfield, that I'm also a massive Holyfield fan.
Yeah,
and he was one of my favorite fighters. I think my two favorite fighters in the late 80s were Tyson, and he was obviously destroying the heavyweights, and Holyfield was doing the same with the cruiserweights. And I couldn't wait till they fought. I was so disappointed when that fight got cancelled. I absolutely love Van Holyfield, brilliant fighter. I would say he's probably the best cruiserweight of all time, and he's definitely up there with the best heavyweights of all time. I discount a lot of Tyson's performances post-prison, but I also do give some credit. Like Holyfield in 96 beating Tyson, he was the underdog. I still give him credit for that win. I just don't think it's obviously his best win. I don't really give Lewis much credit for beating him in 2002. 16 years after he first won the title, Tyson was on antidepressants. He was an absolute shell of himself. But Holyfield had to earn that win in 96, and they both fought really hard.
So Holyfield there's a universal theme in all these conversations that the respect for Lennox Lewis is like very high. Yeah. Holyfield's getting a little bit overlooked, and I rate him so highly. And when you see him on the all-time list and he's down, I'm like, oh, he should be. I always think he should be higher. But okay, yeah. So these early Tyson magazines, it was back when he was Kid Dynamite and all that stuff, Fresh Face. Yeah. So who was it? Was there a family member who sort of introduced you to the sport, or was it just because it was in?
Yeah, just had a couple of people in and around the family that watched boxing. Like I said, we're always talking about the fighters. Sugar Ray Leonard, Hagler were around that time as well, weren't they? And that's just kind of got me into it. And then I got taken down to a local boxing club. Yeah. Just loved it, basically, getting in sparring.
So you boxed as well, do you?
Yeah, I did used to box, yeah. I went on, because we moved around quite a lot as a family, just like with, obviously, the older people in the family had to work. So we'd kind of like move around, and we had some, we settled in one area, and then I ended up boxing for that town. I think I got about 15 fights for them, loads of sparring. And then we had a few issues in the area. It was quite a rough area. And I still came from a family that, I don't know, they weren't to be messed with, really. And they got a bit of trouble, and we all had to kind of relocate, which was, really detrimental to me boxing and stuff, because I couldn't find a decent club after that.
Okay. So what do you do now in terms of you do some coaching now?
Yeah, so I've been running. So I carried on like training. Then I went into martial arts for a while, sort of kickboxing, kung fu. Carried on boxing, and then with the town I'm in now, the local club, which had been here for about maybe 30, 40 years. I used to pop into it every now and then, because it wasn't a very good club. So I used to just pop in every now and then, train a bit. Yeah, there wasn't even. I do a little bit of sparring with some of the fighters they had, but they weren't very experienced. Yeah. And then I just got told, it got to about 2006. I got told that the club was going to close down because the coach had emigrated to China. So I said, okay. And I said, well, and they asked me if I would take it over, and I just said, well, no, I'm too young to be a boxing coach. Right. I think that happened because I used to go down there and again spar people, but also I would always spend maybe like 20 minutes, 25 minutes showing the younger people, or things and technique. It was just something that was natural to me. Yeah. I then went off and was doing my own thing for about 3 months after, and I got a phone call from somebody down there, and they said, look, if you're probably the only person that we know that can take it over. If you can't, then it's probably going to close in the next couple of weeks. We've already spoke to the trust, and they've said, look, if you haven't got a coach down there, it's got to close. Yeah. And I went, I was kind of like persuaded. I said, okay, well, I'll run it for maybe 3 months. I'll run it my way. There were certain people down there I didn't want to be there. Like I didn't like them, bullies and people like that. Want to be hard men. So I said, as long as I've got full control, I can say who trains down there and who doesn't. And they were like, yeah, that's fine. So I just walked in there, got rid of a few people. And here I am, it's going to be 19 years later. Wow. So, yeah.
So who have you got down there? Like kids coming through? What sort of age group is it?
Well, so basically we take people on from about 8, 9. Yeah. Right up until sort of adults. So we've got seniors down there that box, and obviously then you've got juniors. Got a few good little juniors coming through at the moment. We took a bit of a hit, to be honest, David. We were doing quite well. We're getting like in championships and stuff like that, and obviously well-known box clubs like Harringay and stuff. But some lads are doing quite well. But to be honest, like COVID really hit us bad. We had a really good squad where it had momentum. There was about like 4 or 5 fighters that had been there for about 5, 6 years, had them as youngsters. COVID hit, we had to close for 13 months. We reopened, I think, for 4 weeks. And then we had to close again for another 3 months. And then by the time everyone come back, I think only 2 were remaining. One was really overweight, never boxed again, and the other one just had no motivation. So
Right.
he always had to like completely restart again, which has been quite difficult.
Yeah.
And that's sort of where we have been for the last year, just kind of building the squad really.
Yeah.
But it's not just for like people that want to compete. The club's there for the community as well. It gives people a place of sanctuary, somewhere to kind of be around good people, polite people, you know,
Well,
just
that's amazing. And like what you say there is you went in and the first thing you said, right, you're out, get these guys out. You want the right
Yeah.
vibe, right energy. And I think generally speaking, like boxing is that community. Like on Twitter, you get a lot of like angry boxing people, but in real life, boxing is a good community. And so you obviously. So how much time does it like take up for you now these days?
Quite a lot. So you got like 2-3 sessions a week, and then obviously if you've got competitions and things coming up, you do extra sessions.
Yeah.
Then I suppose you do one-to-ones. But I've got like, well, obviously you've tried to get me on here a little while ago, didn't you? And I've had to cancel and reschedule because I just got busy work and life. I still sort of train myself, like gym and a bit of boxing here and there. So, and then obviously coaching people is just hard to fit everything in. But I think like we both watch loads of boxing, don't we? And we do it for a reason because it's, you know, we're passionate about it and we love it. So
with your like hands-on experience in the ring and coaching, how does that help you? I know you're big into the odds as well. So how does that help you sort of assess a matchup?
So for me, okay, so if you look on Twitter, right, especially some of the people that we follow, there's some really astute people on there. Really clever people, really switched on people, and some of them probably have never boxed before, never been in a boxing ring. I've met some really good fighters that were excellent in the ring, and they can't call a fight to save their life. They can't score a fight. They can't pick a winner. They don't know what they're watching. If you get them in the ring, they're absolutely brilliant. And then you get the flip side of that, the complete opposite. Some people that have never been in a fight, never been in the ring, don't even train, but they can tell you what's happening in a fight, what the other person needs to do to win, who's won it, you know, why they've scored it. It's strange. So I'm not of the. You get some people in boxing, don't you? That can be a bit snobberish, and they feel if you haven't boxed before, you don't know what you're watching. I think that's absolute nonsense, quite frankly. If you've had somebody, say a boxer who's had a handful of fights, just because they've been in the ring, does that make them more qualified than somebody who's watched thousands of hours of footage, read thousands of articles? I don't think so. So there's a lot of good people on Twitter, especially as we follow. Obviously, there's a lot of people on there as well that have no idea what they're talking about. But yeah, so it does help in some ways, I guess. But then even before, I think even from like a really young age, I used to watch boxing and I'd have an idea of who I thought was going to win, and then they got matched up. And I don't know, I've just been quite good, I suppose, over the years at picking winners. But there's no kind of like perfect science, is there? I don't think, picking a winner. You kind of get your gut feeling. That's based on your sort of previous experience of that fighter, or if you watch tape, you know, styles. And then I guess you kind of break it down a little bit more. You've got to consider other things like where they're at in their career, what age are they at, have they had much wear and tear, have they had injuries, have they been inactive, have they switched trainers? You sometimes get other bits of information, you know, are they being dedicated, are they lacking commitment, are they stepping up in weight, are they going down in weight? You know, if you're 35, 36 and suddenly you're dropping a weight class, it's never a good sign, is it? You have some fighters that gradually get wear and tear over fights that, you know, have granite chins, but then you start noticing, you know, 2-3 fights ago, they're not taking punches as well as they used to. So a lot of things factor in. It's not there's no perfect science, and nobody exists, whether on Twitter or anyone else, that can pick every single fight. And that's why we love it, because it's unpredictable. So you make your pick and all right, you might be right. I think probably around 80-85% I'm generally right with my picks if you go through kind of my record. So I think it's fairly high, but like, you know, there's probably others that are higher than that, and then there's, you know, quite a few that are lower than that. But upsets happen, don't they? And you just can't tell.
It's interesting. I couldn't agree with you more. All those things, and also the you just hear rumors as well. So I don't know if this is true, but I heard AJ stopped doing road work a long time ago. Like, and as soon as I heard that, I'm just like, right, that's a red flag. I heard Usyk in trade. I think this is incredible if this is true. In training, Usyk does he spars 15 rounds, not 12. He does 4-minute rounds, not 3, and he takes 30 seconds rest, not a minute. So if during any one of those rounds his back touches the ropes, he resets the clock and goes again. And if that's true, and who knows if it is, it's just extraordinary. And, you know, well, you've got some people who are cutting corners, ditching their road work. You've got Usyk going, no, I'm going to make this very tough sport even tougher. So when I get in the fight, it's, you know, relatively easy compared to...
Definitely. He's incredible, though, isn't he? He's kind of see, a lot of people know Usyk since he stepped up to heavyweight or maybe his cruiserweight run, but he's been around for years. Him and Lomachenko and the rest, you know, sort of Eastern, you know, European countries. But he's he's just a phenomenal talent. He's one of the things that's really underrated about Usyk is his IQ. He knows when to work. He knows when to not. He knows when to get breather. He knows when to trade. When he gets caught with a good punch, he's got a real good poker face. He knows when to sort of, you know, keep his guard up. He knows when to switch it up. I think obviously his stamina is incredible. That's something that is probably natural as well as hard work. But he was like, as soon as he moved up to heavyweight, a lot of people were kind of dismissing him. He's not going to do this. He's not going to do that. And I always fancied him to beat AJ. Always fancied him to beat Tyson Fury. You know, and he did. And I think he's had an excellent run. But I think he matches up. I mean, cruiserweight, he's definitely in the top 2, isn't he? You know, but there have been a lot of good fighters at cruiserweight. I mean, if you think of someone like Dwight Mohammed McQuire, he would have given Usyk a really hard fight. The buzzsaw, just because he's constant beyond your chest. You know, he was also quite quick as well. I think Holyfield would have given him massive problems just because of his combination punching. As soon as Holyfield stepped in and he got his front foot, you know, beside you, bang, he'd let the shots go. He wouldn't wait. There's no split second wait, which is what Usyk needs to get his left off. He's a brilliant fighter. But just little bits like that, like you said about the road work and stuff, always coming to it.
So right now, I think I rate Holyfield ahead of Usyk, but I think that's my opinion. But I also think Usyk would beat Holyfield if that's possible. I think those two things can be true. So, and do you so as you've boxed yourself and you coach, do you have a sort of preference for your style in the fights that you watch, or is that not a thing?
No. So you'll get. So I've got this kind of approach to boxing coaching that you try and develop people's natural skills and natural ability. And when you get someone in the gym first, and you say, okay, get in your fighting stance, over the first kind of 6 months, you'll see them naturally try and do certain things. I try and encourage that because you've got other people that coach differently and they want everyone to fight the same. And which is nothing wrong with that in terms of, and actually some of those clubs that do that and coaches are really successful. But I just think, like, say if you've got 100 fighters and you get them all to box the same way, you might get maybe 10, 15 of them that are successful, and then the rest will drop off because they just can't adapt to that naturally. But if you focus on how they kind of naturally, you know, sort of hold their form and then just refine it, you've probably got a better chance in terms of probability of them becoming a good fighter, but also reaching their potential. And that's all you can do with a fighter, is make them reach their potential. Okay. You can get somebody walking the gym that's got a lot of natural talent. And some people have a debate about natural talent, but you only have to look through history about, you know, okay, I'm going to train every day, 8 hours a day. Okay. That means I'm going to be good as Sugar Ray Leonard. No, that's not how it works. Okay. You can train exactly the same hours, same amount of time with the same coaches. You know, fighter A is not necessarily going to be better or as good as fighter B. That's just how it works. So you do have some natural talent in that. But so I believe in kind of refining people. And I think the way you can tell that you're successful when you coach somebody, whether they go on to fight professional, achieve things in professional ranks, whether they become a top amateur elite, or whether they have 2-3 fights on the local amateur circuit and lose those fights. But if that's what their potential is and they've reached it and they feel like they've achieved something, then that for me is success. Of course. It's an individual thing. So I don't, like I said, I rather kind of refine people's natural talents, and you give them like the basics and the foundation, but also encourage certain things rather than everyone fighting the same. So just because physiques come into it as well, don't they? 6'6" guy shouldn't be trying to fight like Mike Tyson.
Yeah, right.
You know? Actually, if you look at Mike Tyson in his amateur days, some of his fights, he was like up on his toes and would try and box.
Right.
He'd use his head movement rather, he'd be in and out rather than just the going forward, moving the head movement, and then the shots go. So, but there's lots of coaching people, isn't there?
Yeah. So What about? I think you go to a few fights. Can you think of any sort of the best fights you've seen live?
Yeah, so you go to a lot of amateur shows with the club and just watching other sort of fights and stuff. Been to quite a few fights. I'd say probably my favourite one, just because it was a really good fight from a few years back, was Joe Kosagi against Mikhail Kessler.
Oh wow!
I love Kessler as a fighter, absolutely brilliant. He's more like textbook boxing, very
Brilliant.
technical. Whereas Kosagi, again, coming back to this natural talent thing, he kind of had his own unique style, didn't he?
Yeah, I love Kosagi.
Yeah, exceptional stamina, real grit, determined, great chin, very good power. Something I think is underrated because he was a bit of a puncher in the amateurs and also early pros, but he had hand problems, didn't he? And he was able to mix it up. And I remember, I think it was in Cardiff, wasn't it? Freezing that night, by the way. Which is another story.
Amazing atmosphere.
Yeah, he came out. That fight started off really frenetic. Him and Kessler were going, and Kessler had a great.
Kosagi dropped him early, didn't he?
He didn't drop Kessler. No, they didn't drop each other. But it was back and forth the early rounds. And Kessler, I feel, was edging it.
Okay.
And he gave Kosagi, I think, a great uppercut in the 5th round, which buzzed him. And then I think it might have been the 5th round where Kosagi went back to the corner, and then it just all changed.
Yeah.
He basically came out using a different style, started to box and move a bit more, stopped getting him as involved, started to rely more on his speed, and he kind of like ran away with it then in a really competitive fight. But that was a really, really good fight. I really enjoyed that.
Brilliant. Kosagi is one of my favorite all-time fights. Like for my interest in boxing, watching him come through and underrated, and from a betting point of view as well, I was always like, he's so hard to beat, and he slaps. He doesn't. He's brilliant. He's lightning fast. He's rock hard. He's got amazing chin, and he's just got this mindset that is just extraordinary. And he doesn't look like a traditional boxer, but he's just incredible. I loved his fights. Who was the guy who dropped him? Was it Byron Mitchell?
Mitchell dropped him really heavy in the 2nd round, and Kosagi got up, and as he got up onto his knee, he kind of fell backwards a little bit, didn't he? Steadied himself, got up. And instead of holding or trying to run, he just started trading. And Mitchell could really fight and he could really punch as well. And Kosagi, but I mean, that's just a fighter he was. He's the type of guy, Joe Kosagi, because obviously he's quite humble, isn't he? But brilliant boxer. But you just would not mess with someone like him in the street either, would you? He just built differently.
Brilliant. I think it's a shame that his wins at the end of his career over Hopkins and Jones. I don't put much stock in those because those guys were definitely on the wrong side of the. Yeah,
although Hopkins went on and had a good run at light heavyweight, didn't he? After Kosagi, I'd probably give him more credit for that. I don't give him any credit for Roy Jones. When Roy Jones was finished as soon as he stepped back down from heavyweight.
Yeah. I mean that him going. They're talking about Usyk going back down, like that. Roy Jones going back down. That's the benchmark for what muscle loss can do to you when at that age when you're going back down. I don't think Usyk's staying at heavyweight, surely.
Definitely, there's no way he's going to go back down. And also Roy Jones, because he really struggled in the first half of the fight, didn't he? But he scraped through. If he'd retired, then people would be talking about him as one of the greatest fighters of all time. But he just suffered from some horrific KOs, didn't he, at the end of his career? But what an amazing fighter he was! Absolutely gifted.
Again, he's like one of my all-time favorites, and the legacy ruining, and I absolutely love Roy Jones. Okay, so what's your favorite weight division?
Favorite weight division, probably welterweight. I like most of the weights, to be honest. Like for example, I like super bantamweight at the moment. That's been good historically. Featherweight's obviously been a good division. I love the flyweights. I probably haven't got a favorite if I'm being honest. I'll watch. I kind of just love boxing really. And every weight division is quite different, aren't they? As well, just in terms of pace and things.
Okay, so what would the sport's obviously a controversial one. If you could change one rule, what would you change?
I don't really like the way they score rounds 10-10 sometimes. I hate that. I think there's always some. I get you can get even rounds, but just pick a winner. Depending on what your sort of judging criteria is, or scoring criteria. That I find that a bit annoying. I don't like this where they're giving fighters extra time to recover. So you get a knockdown in certain states. And then it's like, move here, and it's gone, isn't it? You get split seconds in boxing. A fighter might be like 10 rounds behind, finally knocks the guy down, and then he probably got about 3-4 seconds after that count's finished to get in there and land another good punch, and then his window's gone, isn't it? And I think that's really unfair. So that's something I definitely would change because I just find that I just don't think that. I think that's a really bad thing to do for a fighter.
Yeah, that's a good one. And so 2024 was amazing. What do you have a standout fight, your favorite fight of 2024, and also what you're looking forward to most in 2025?
So 2024, so many good fights, wasn't there? I absolutely loved watching Inoue fight. He's such a technically proficient fighter, clinical.
He's back next week.
Yeah, I think it's a couple of weeks, isn't it? Is it 24th against Goodman?
Yeah.
He suffered an injury, didn't he? But love this fight against Fulton. That was just a brilliant fight against a really good fighter. And then against Neary, where he got dropped. It just shows you, like, someone like Inoue who's got an absolutely brilliant chin and ability to take a punch. You get caught in the right spot, you're going to go over. But he got up, recovered, controlled his emotions, stuck to his sort of defensive box for the rest of that round, then came out and started picking him apart. Yeah. So I love watching him. Then obviously Usyk, of course. Yeah. Leading up Tyson Fury fight against Usyk, people were dismissing him, too small. Heavyweights in the past would be too small. No one could live with these modern age giants like AJ and Tyson Fury. 6'9", moves like a middleweight, punches harder than George Foreman, just ridiculous stuff. And I'm not his biggest fan, but I do rate him as a fighter. He's a very good fighter. I just became really tired of kind of just the absolute nonsense that people were attaching to him and dismissing previous great heavyweights. The truth is, if you look at the great heavyweights of the past, obviously a lot of them are on the smaller side. We say smaller side, but then you stand next to them and they're bloody massive, aren't they? I think the sign of being an all-time great fighter or a Hall of Fame fighter is that you have if you were head-to-head with any fighter from history, there's a chance that you could win. And I think that's, the fighters from the past, you can't tell me. I think they're posting it recently that, people like Tyson, Holyfield, Holmes, Foreman, obviously, of course, Ali in his prime, Frazier. You just can't tell me that those guys wouldn't have been able to mix it and probably dominate in this age because, just because somebody's 6'9" or whatever. I loved them. It was really, the first fight was excellent. I thought both Fury and Usyk done really well in the first fight. I thought Usyk got off to a really good start and Fury came back, had a really good 3 rounds, hurt Usyk. And that showed his level of ability as well. And then Usyk does what he does, goes up a gear and people can't go with him. Annoyingly with the rematch, my initial thoughts were that it was a kind of, really close fight, which I think was a very competitive fight. But my DAZN stream kept bloody glitching. I say stream, well, the actual app itself, which is annoying because I'm paying for it. But that kept kind of glitching and freezing and stuff. So when I done a post online, people were then saying, "What fight were you watching?" So I had to go back and rewatch it. And I know some people on there that are usually quite accurate with who they say have won a fight. And I was like, kind of bowed to them. I was like, "Oh, fair enough."
The 3 judges were in agreement, and also like most people who I know had the same score. I had it a little close. I had it like 115, 113, but I was being sort of cautious. And most people, it was almost like the most agreed scorecard I've seen recently. But I didn't think Fury was going to be as good as he was in that rematch. I thought he was gone. I really did. I said beforehand, I gave him like a 20% chance of winning that fight. And he fought brilliantly. I mean, he lost comfortably, but he fought brilliantly compared to what I thought he had left. Considering the shape he was in, I'm amazed he could still do 12 rounds. But it's.
Do you think about the other fighters, heavyweight contenders that are out there at the moment? Daniel Dubois, Bacole, maybe Joe Parker, and others coming up. Who would you actually pick to beat Fury out of all them lot? There's probably not many. I
just do worry that he gets old overnight, and I think he's definitely. And I also actually thought Usyk looked a little older on that rematch.
Yeah,
and I was like, you've got a year left. You're crazy fit. You're as fit as a 34-year-old mate, but it just feels like you don't want to go you don't want to go and lose to someone who you shouldn't be losing to.
I thought Fury was a lot more cautious in this fight, and that
he was.
He had his right hand up very close to his chin this time, didn't he? He turned his shoulder a bit more as well to make himself a smaller target. He was nice and tucked in. He didn't take as many risks.
I think he thought if he got to the final bell, there was this chance that he'd get the nod. And I think he was fighting to go the distance, not to.
Yeah, I think so as well.
And all that chat about I'm going to smash. I mean, he's never smashed anyone. Alone,
he's not a big puncher.
He's not a big puncher, and he's never even scored a 10-8 round against a southpaw, I don't think. And then he's fighting,
Do you know what as well? Like you always hear people when they talk about fighting Usyk and what they're going to do. Well, you just need to walk him down and bully the smaller man. There's a reason why people don't do that. And you're talking about the rest of the crop, the best heavyweights in the world, you know, AJ, Dubois, Fury. There's a reason why they don't just try and walk him down, because look what happens. They get hit back and they get hit hard. And Usyk hits a lot harder than you think.
Oh, yeah.
He's just one of these fighters with his technique and style.
Yeah.
A lot of his punches are pulled because he's trying to maneuver you into a big punch. He doesn't like put power in every single punch, but when he does hit you hard, you feel it. You know, and Fury, I mean, he takes a decent punch. Okay, he's been knocked down a few times, but that doesn't mean you don't take a good punch. He's got a good chin. What he's got unbelievable recovery powers. Probably some of the best you'll ever see. But like, you know, Usyk had AJ rock and roll, didn't he? Hurt Dubois. You know, he caught Chisora, who's got a good chin with a solid, I think it was a lead left hand in their fight, and he backed right off. You know, even in his cruiserweight run, you know, Bradis and people like that were getting moved backwards, and Gassier and, you know, Michael Hunter. I think that's a really underrated win that he had as well. He's an excellent fighter. But he hits a lot harder than you think. But I thought they were both really good in the rematch. Yeah.
So you obviously you're into the betting. So what's the biggest sort of like the best hot take you think you've had in sort of going back for the last decade or two, where you've just either a big price upset or even a favourite you just absolutely were certain about, and then balance that out with a cold take where you've got it wrong, where you just thought,
yeah. So people remember me for the cold take here, then. It's usually the case. And I don't know. I've had quite a few. I've done quite well in that side of things over the years. I probably reckon about 80% of the time, if I make a prediction on Twitter, I've normally got a bit of action on it. I'm quite confident when I make my predictions. Off the top of my head, probably a few years back, was it 2000? Probably quite a while now. It's 2017, I think, was Tank Davis against Pedraza.
Okay, right.
Yeah, because they put Tank Davis in relatively early, and the odds were really stupid. I can't remember. It was like, I think it was like either 2-1 or 3-1. But he's an underdog basically when they first announced. But obviously, I've been following Tank Davis since the amateur days, and anybody, I mean, really, I was following like the Mayweather gym and who they were connected to would know that, you know, he was one of the up and coming kind of stars. And then obviously as a young pro, so I put like a good chunk on that and won quite a lot. So that was quite nice. And never got odds like that on him again. And then the other ones, oh God, probably two that really irritate me. And in hindsight, you just kind of hit your head, don't you, that I lost on David Avanesian against Josh Kelly. That fight started off pretty much how I thought it would for 4 rounds. Josh Kelly moving, outboxing him, and then he got tired. And then, I just bloody I lost on that. So that was really annoying. And probably really bad call in hindsight, given kind of his inactivity, the fact that he'd had injuries and the car accident, was Errol Spence to beat Bud Crawford. And that is my fault, because you should never underestimate Bud Crawford. Absolutely generational talent, all-time great. And in hindsight, I think even if Errol Spence had been at his peak, he probably wasn't going to beat Bud Crawford. He's that good, isn't he?
And look, the betting was pretty close in that one as well, wasn't it? So, you know.
I guess so. But it still irritates you, doesn't it, when you make that bad
I've had some far worse ones than that. So have you ever met any pro fighters in real life?
I've met quite a few, because they obviously come to amateur shows, don't they? Yes, you bump into pro fighters all the time, really. I don't know, it's a bit cringe to name drop, isn't it, really?
Okay.
But you do get like local fighters. Like there was John Ryder, for example, before one of his last fights, he was at a Billericay show and just being nice to people and saying hello and everything. You know, you often get like fighters just turn up out of nowhere. If you got like the Highland Day Box Club, for example, they're all over the place, like pro fighters and well-known fighters as well, which I think is nice, because obviously you got young boxers there trying to aspire to be, you know, to be where they are, and they're there sort of mingling with the crowd and saying hello, and people take photos and stuff. So, but the boxing community's a few things. It can be really toxic. There's a lot of toxic people in it, even at the amateur level. And it's one of the only sports in the world where you can get into it with no qualifications. It's almost like a bullshitter's paradise, for want of a better term. But you do also, on the flip side, I guess, some really knowledgeable people in it that know what they're talking about, are in it for the right reasons, are generally nice people as well. So, and that's part of it. That's really nice to see when you go to shows.
Yeah, great. Okay. So who do you have as the best British boxer of all time? You've talked about it.
Yeah, there's so many, isn't there? I don't know. Obviously, he's world British overall. Kasagi's definitely up there. I think Nassim Hamid was an excellent fighter when he was with with the Ingles. I thought
Okay.
Brendan Ingle was an amazing trainer and coach, and just sort of a man of the community, really. I don't know. It's just there's a lot. Isn't it? It's hard to say the best, though, isn't it? I think because you can pick and choose what they are good for and what they achieved. You've had some fighters obviously don't have the longevity, but actually at the peak of their powers, were better than some of the others. I really like Nigel Benn as well. Like I said, he's the best British fighter ever, but one of the most exciting. Lennox Lewis is definitely up there. I know some people would argue that because of his Canadian kind of background as well, but essentially he was British, wasn't he? So probably I'd probably say off the top of my head, Lennox Lewis.
Yeah, great. Okay. What is the worst controversy or the worst piece of sportsmanship you've seen in the sport?
I'm trying to remember his name. The American boxer who lost the fight and then he punched his opponent as the decision was announced.
Butler.
It was James Butler.
He was the puncher or the receiver? James Butler. I can't remember if he was the puncher or the receiver, but terrible.
Yeah, I think he was a puncher, and he's just like a loose cannon, wasn't he? Because I think he went on then to murder somebody involved in boxing. He's now in prison, isn't he? Probably for the rest of his life, which is the best place for him. But that's one of the worst things I've seen. That was obviously a few years ago. I don't like to see anything like that. But I know emotions sometimes get involved, and people have arguments in the ring afterwards. But you generally should try to be respectful.
The other guy's career was over as well after that from the injury.
That was awful.
Okay, what about most controversial decision?
I don't know. What was the one recently where I just could not? It was only a couple of weeks ago.
I know there was a shocking scorecard in was it Liam Parra? The other guy got the decision, but apparently
that was really bad. I think it was a Mamoon against McKenna a few years ago.
Okay.
We watched the fight, and they had a rematch, didn't they? Mamoon, I think, stopped him. I'm probably pronouncing that name wrong, so not very good at my pronunciations, but that was absolutely horrendous.
Right.
That was a really bad one. I also like in terms of like more high level fights, even though I'm a massive Tio Trinidad fan, he's one of my favorite fighters of all time. Absolutely loved his Run of Destruction. I don't think he's spoken about enough these days. He's probably in my top 3 favorite fighters ever. He got very, very lucky against Oscar De La Hoya. I thought De La Hoya. I know he like closed the gap towards the end, but I thought he was getting handsomely outboxed for most of that fight.
A long time ago. Can't really remember it, but I remember watching it. So is there anything you do differently when you're assessing fights, either like in terms of like the pre-match analysis or when you're watching it scoring? Anything you think you'd do differently?
Not really. I get a good feeling when a fight's announced, and I'll often take my action quite early. There's a couple of people that, there's a few people on Twitter actually that I will listen to their opinions. And sometimes, I don't know, I think it's very important to stick to your own initial thoughts. But it's also interesting to see the other view as well. And I think when you are assessing fights, especially if you're predicting or going to actually put money on them, you need to look at kind of the alternative outcomes as well. You can't just think, well, he's going to do this and that, because it's also about the other guy as well. What are they capable of? What can they do? I think with betting on boxing, some people are probably similar to myself, more like predictors, and then they will, place action on the person that they are backing for whatever reason, whether they just think it's stylistically a really good or favorable matchup for them, or they just think they're a better fighter, or they, you really break it down like that person's not going to be able to get past a jab, or they're going to get outworked on the inside, or eventually they're going to get, they're going to wear it down. And then you've got other people that obviously take action, but they play the odds more. I've done that a few times in the past, but that's probably not what I don't do that all the time. There are some people that are really successful. They'll play a lot of underdogs because they know unless that favorite boxes a perfect fight or close to a perfect fight, they could lose. And, I think overall they might lose a few with action like that. But overall, at the end of the year, they look at their figures and actually they're in profit, and quite a few of their underdogs have, done the business. Yeah,
I think that's true. And it's there's one thing like assessing the matchup, but if you're betting, the odds have to be a factor. So we've got Dubois Parker. Now, Dubois might well win that fight in style, but whether he should be the favorite that he is another question. So it's like I may have a view that I think X is going to win the fight, but the odds are so out of whack that I might back the other guy. And I'm not saying that is my pick for this fight, but sometimes that is the case.
No, you're absolutely right. And I've thought about that fight just like you have, exactly that. The key to that fight is what happens when Parker gets hit in the first 3 rounds.
Yeah.
If he does what he's done in the past a few times and soaks it up and comes back, that's going to get really interesting, because, you know, I'm not convinced that Dubois can still, you know, fight at a pace and continue to get hit, but then also Parker can spoil as well a little bit, as he's kind of he'll catch you a good shot, spoil for a little bit, and then he catch you again. That's a really interesting fight, and I think that's an example of where the odds are probably a little bit too wide at the moment. I'd have to think about that. I think that's a difficult fight to call, because you could see it both ways. I could see Parker kind of spoiling, mauling a bit, maybe trying to come under Dubois' jab and offset him a little bit. But you could also see him getting caught.
Yep. And also I can see a distance fight, and I can see a 5-round war. I can see everything, you know. And I rate Parker. I've always liked his fundamentals, and also these two guys, Parker and Dubois. They're both on this resurgence, and it's a question of who is of their resurgence, who is the most legitimate of them, because there are question marks about all of their. You know, Dubois' win against AJ, the amount of shots he took against Hrgovic, and then Parker's done well against, you know, a now retired Wilder and an older man. And so it's how much of this resurgence is actually real and how much is flattering.
Yeah, so that was the last fight I went to, actually, Dubois AJ.
Right.
Brilliant. Yeah, most of that place was pro AJ. Of
course,
he just got caught early. Just seemed like a rabbit in the headlights, really anxious about getting hit. Almost like a guaranteed way to get hurt or get knocked out in boxing is if you're afraid of getting hit.
Yeah.
And it's almost like you get some people that suffer from anxiety in terms of taking a punch, and they're often more anxious about getting hit than the actual pain of getting hit. No one likes to get hit. It's uncomfortable, isn't it? Some people just soak it up better. But he looked really anxious, and I don't know if that's because something's happened in the gym. Maybe he knows himself he's not taking punches as well as he used to. But yeah, it was quite good. I mean, it was a good fight, but obviously he more so in terms of him just managing to hang in there for that long. He was always just one punch away from getting knocked out. It's kind of I think he's pretty much done, if I'm being honest, AJ. But Dubois has done really well. He's had a really good 12 months, hasn't he?
Brilliant. Yeah, it's refreshing to see a guy in his 20s, mid-20s, sort of doing well, instead of seeing all these guys in their late 30s. So a few more to wrap this up. Okay, so do you have any highlights of boxing? I know you're a big movie guy as well. Any favorite standout movies, books, or podcasts?
Well, listen, obviously you got the Rob Tebbit, you know, from Boxing News, so that podcast with Barry Jones and is it Andy? What's his surname? Clark. Really, I really enjoy that all the time. I think I've listened to a few of your interviews as well with some of the people on next, which have been quite good. I just watch as much boxing as I can, and just interviews and fights, you know, whether they're from the past or more recent. Read a lot of boxing books. My favorite boxing book's probably Dark Trade. That's absolutely brilliant book, fascinating. And I like all the movies, boxing movies, to be honest. Sort of the Rocky ones, I suppose, more traditional ones and stuff like that. Raging Bull, majority of them really.
And okay, I reckon I might know this one, the best ring entrance or the best goosebump moment in that the referee's giving final instructions, the heart's pounding. So best entrance or most goosebump moment? Yeah,
probably prime Mike Tyson fights, I reckon. I used to love Costa Zoo as well. I used to get goosebumps watching him, Tito Trinidad, or just all the great fights. Nassim Hamad's a really good fighter to watch, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Back in his day. Any of the big fights, you know, like I probably get it more so now watching the Inoue, I think, than anyone else in terms of goosebumps, because you just know something's going to happen.
Great.
He's not just in there to box you. He's waiting. Everything's built up to catching you, isn't it? Absolutely love him. And the ring entrance that he's had, obviously, watching on TV with the guitarist and everything, it's just, absolutely brilliant.
So the final one, and you can delay on this and we'll do it another time if you want, but would you be able to give me a quick pick of any of the 22nd February Saudi card, anything that stands out there a couple of weeks out from it?
I'm still backing Beterbiev. I backed him the first time. I think he can improve more in the rematch than Bivol can. I think Bivol fought a near perfect fight in that fight. I believe the fight could have gone either way. Wouldn't have had any complaints if he'd got it. I thought he boxed really well. I was quite surprised at his physicality. I didn't think he'd be able to stand his ground as much as he did, but even where he did, you could see he was fatiguing mentally and getting pushed back. Petreviev made a really good tactical move in that fight halfway through, which is when he started having more success. He started moving to his right because he was getting hit a lot by Bivol straight right, wasn't he? So he started moving to his right, but obviously he was keeping his guard up to avoid the left hook. And it was then offsetting Bivol, who was needing that split second more to get a shot off, and then he started getting caught himself. So that was really interesting. So I'm back in Petreviev.
I didn't spot that, but I did think it was a fight of two halves. I gave Bivol the first 6 rounds. I thought he swept the first 6, and obviously it got close. But I didn't know that. I didn't notice that, so I'm going to rewatch that.
Yeah, rewatch that, and you'll see him the way he moves around. He's obviously, I thought it was excellent. Whether or not his corner told him to do that, I don't know. I was really impressed with his sort of just because sometimes you have to do that, especially at the highest level, because the margins are so small. And even if you're having some success, you need a bit more to actually make the fight even or just get slightly on top. It's the smallest of things that can make a difference. So that was really interesting. Who's the other one on there? Madrimov Ortiz, is it? Yeah, I think Madrimov's got a really good chance of winning that fight. I think Ortiz is an excellent fighter, really strong, but I also think he's an accident waiting to happen. I think we've seen that in his last fight. You can't charge in like that, guns blazing, and not expect to get hit back. Who else is on the top of it?
We got Dubois, Parker, Stevenson, Schofield.
We've
got Shiraz going for a title.
I really like Shiraz. I think Dames is on the other end of his career. I think Shiraz will possibly get caught himself. But he's so tight, isn't he? I think he's so composed. I think he will hold it together and then probably catch him a bit later on and get him out of there.
Solid. And then Zhang Caballero.
So I think that's a hard fight to call. If I was setting up a strategy for Caballero, I'd get him to keep it nice and tight first 2-3 rounds. Just try to soak up a little bit of the punishment, but more on his gloves. And then just try obviously he needs to bridge that gap, doesn't he? Get close to Zhang. Zhang has that head up high. If he can't hold you off or hold you at length, then he does struggle once you get past that lead hand. I think that's a really interesting fight. If Caballero can if he can take the punishment, which is more like single shots, isn't it, with Zhang? I think he can close that gap, outwork him, and possibly hurt him as well. So there's 2 or 3 fights there, and I'm not completely 100% on yet, but I think that's what makes it such a good show as well.
I mean, all of them. There are debates to have on either side all the way down that card. I think it's brilliant. All right, Sean, that's brilliant. We've done like an hour almost. So we'll put your Twitter. What is your Twitter again? Say it.
So obviously, I think it comes under @Dravenism or something, but
okay, we'll put it in the description. And do you have any other social media where we can follow you?
No, just there. Yes, Sean M @Dravenism. Sorry, Draven 1SM. Just follow me on there. People. I think I follow about 700 people on there. Anybody that does follow me should probably go through those people I follow, because some really good accounts on there, including your own.
Brilliant.
Some excellent people on there that are just brilliant at predicting, brilliant at sort of like the taking action on fights as well. So it'd be worth their time because they'll come across some really good accounts.
That's brilliant to know that as well. Brilliant. All right, Sean. Well, look, that was really great fun and brilliant insights. I thought it would be, and I really appreciate your time.
No problem. Cheers, David. Speak to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.